So organisational needs are changing constantly now. Digital transformation and the growth in technology-enabled opportunities is creating a very adaptable and agile environment for organisations that they really need to reposition themselves to take advantage of. One of the methodologies to support this is data-driven decision making. Now, in simple terms, that's the use of data, facts and measurement to support your decision making. But it's actually not as simple as that. I think it's actually about how do you embed data into your organization to support your decision making, to create insights, and actually look across your performance as a group to identify opportunities that you can then take advantage of. It is an opportunity-rich environment, and I think one of the fundamental challenges that organizations have is how do you pick the right opportunity? In embarking on their data-driven journey, a lot of organizations are creating dashboards and very broad insights. But the question I've always been asked by executives is that, so what? You're giving me this dashboard. What is the insight it's giving me? And what is the decision that you're asking me to make in light of the data you've just presented to me? In this talk today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the opportunities of data-driven decision making, some of the challenges, and then provide a little bit of a roadmap and an option on how you can actually start to grow the culture and dynamic to become a data-driven organization. So I think if you were to ask a lot of organizations whether they do data-driven decision making, I think a lot of them would argue that they probably do to some extent. They produce business cases, they provide evidence to support business cases and some of the decisions they're making. They might even use data to support their operational processes and measure performance as an organization. The challenge is that that doesn't scale up and out. Pivotal to all of those decision-making processes is the leader. These processes are about providing data to the leaders who then become the ultimate decision maker. And I think a lot of the benefit that comes from a data-driven approach is about the democratization of decision making. It's about the empowerment of staff to make decisions in their own sphere of influence, to be able to improve impact and actually drive the organization forward. So as you start to think about what is a data-driven approach for your organization, there's a number of benefits that you start to think about. And I think as you start to think about the benefits you're looking for, you start to realize that actually this is as much about a cultural shift and a behavioral shift for your organization as it is anything else. So just a few of the benefits I'm just going to run through now, just to give you some idea of how it actually changes the way you operate as an organization. So one of the important benefits is about consistency of decision making. So by following a data-driven approach, you're using a structured data set in a similar way, following a similar process. That allows people to come and go from the process. So no longer will your decision-making process rely on that one critical SME who is the only person that understands this environment, therefore they must be in every decision that's being made. You can use data to empower other people. And actually through that process you can see people come and grow, and if people leave your organization or you need to increase the pace and the people aren't available because they're busy on more important things, you can actually use other people, and you can all follow a consistent repeatable process that you can have confidence in as an organization. Now because of that, you bring on the second, which is about the ability to adapt and be agile in your decision making. So again, if you're not waiting for individuals, and I think we've all been in the circumstances where you need a decision to be made, but you can't get the key people together for a week or two. So everything is really on hold, awaiting those people to become available. If you're using data, you can condense those timeframes. You don't necessarily need the subject matter expert. You can actually use other people. And you can become far more nimble as an organization through those processes and think about your level of decision making in a very different way. That availability and that democratization that I talked to as well, though, allows really to grow and increase awareness across your organization about what's going on. You know, we work with the adage that there's no bad ideas, and actually there is no one source of good ideas. They can come from anywhere within your organization. And by increasing awareness through data, you actually open up a whole load of new ideas from a whole bunch of different people that perhaps you wouldn't have been getting otherwise. And equally then, because you've raised that awareness, they're using that data for that consistent process. You can actually go one step further and empower people in that environment to make those decisions directly. Because what it also then gives you is increased traceability and accountability. So you can look at the data, you can see what data drove what decision, and you're not really putting the emphasis on the individual, you're putting the emphasis on the data. So that accountability doesn't go to the individual unless they go against the data. Because then you have to understand why that person didn't follow the data, didn't follow the advice that the data was indicating, and took a personal gut feel on why they made that decision. But if you're following data, then actually the trust and accountability can be there because you're using that in a far more consistent way. So that traceability becomes, and the transparency becomes a lot more prevalent in a data-driven approach. Now, the interesting aspect of this is that one of the benefits that I've seen is about that ability to manage costs. Now, I think a lot of people would argue just making data available doesn't actually enable you to manage costs. It doesn't save anything. No, it doesn't. But actually, by empowering people to use data to make decisions, you can reduce cost. Certainly what I've been able to do in other organizations is provide the cost information around technology rather than looking at the invoice, which is the end of the process when you've already incurred the costs and you're paying for it. Look at the actual resource cost around CPUs or memory or other server resources to the practitioner that's implementing these services. They're the ones that understand them, they're the ones that understand the performance of those systems, and they're the ones that can make micro adjustments that will ultimately deliver you savings. They can find waste, they can find times when perhaps a service isn't going to be used for an extended period, so you can reduce the amount of resource and save money. And through that empowerment, you can actually use a data-driven approach to provide consistency and confidence to empower people at the coalface to make decisions that will result in cost savings. And I've seen incredibly significant cost savings come from this approach. And that ultimately then can go into all of your processes and lead to significant improvement in your processes. You don't need somebody that can write a 15-page business case for minor adjustments into a small process. If you've empowered people and they're using data, and you can immediately get the feedback from that data of whether that's a good decision or a bad decision. So that repeatability, I think, it really just enables you to empower people and lets people take control of their own process, their own environment, to deliver cost saving, improved performance, and the removal of waste from the environment. Now, when we think about that, though, what we start to realize is data-driven decision making isn't simply about including a table in your business case. It's actually about a different mindset and a different approach to decision making that is all about building agility and adaptability and empowerment through an organization. I think the data at the moment is tending to show that organizations are struggling. Like all of digital transformation, you know, we're still in that 70% bracket of failure in data-driven decision-making initiatives. Organizations are still struggling because they're failing to see the cultural impact of these changes. They're looking at it as a data and technology initiative that is going to provide ultimately just a bunch of tables to the decision makers, but don't actually change the nature of decision making in the organization. And that's the cultural shift I think organizations need to start thinking about. Because ultimately, if you're just using data-driven decision making just to provide improved information to that decision maker, yes, you're going to get a benefit. No question about it, because you've got that increased transparency, you've got increased performance information, you've got increased visibility that ultimately will improve decision making. You won't get the full scale of the benefit though, and that's part of the challenge I think in data-driven decision making that is similar to the challenge around Agile and some of these other methodologies. So the example I use around Agile is something that was explained to me many years ago when I first started on my Agile practice a long time ago. Was that the problem with Agile is that it's very rare that it results in a catastrophic failure. It's very rare for an organization to start to implement Agile practices and the entire environment to go wrong. Because ultimately, if you think about it, for example, some of the ceremonies, getting staff together for a daily stand-up to understand what you did yesterday, what's your plan for tomorrow, and identify any roadblocks as you would in a Scrum daily stand-up. That improves communication and transparency across the group. It improves collaboration. It improves opportunities to share ideas, to solve problems, remove roadblocks. And it also removes hiding places so that people can be non-productive for a long period of time without actually doing anything. So you will get a benefit from there. But ultimately, if you don't go on and implement retrospectives, product demos, and all these other ceremonies as part of that framework, you won't get the full benefit of the Agile methodology. So, and that's why we say that actually you get some benefit no matter what, because it is all designed to improve interactions and collaboration, and you get benefit from that, but you don't get the full impact. And data-driven decision making is another one of those that providing information to the leader, yes, improves it, but you don't get the scalability of decision making that you're looking for. You won't get the empowerment, and you certainly won't get the rapid improvement that you're looking for from data-driven decision making. So you have to think about this as a cultural shift, not a technology and data shift. And that's why I think a lot of organizations are struggling. Now, one way of approaching this then is to look at your investment process, because I think there's two avenues you can go down when you start to look about this. You start to produce dashboards and indicators around your operational performance, or you start to look at where you're making key strategic decisions around your investment portfolio and how you're delivering change for the organization. Word of warning, I think, around the operational performance, because some of the decisions that you're actually looking to make there is a group performant or non-performant. That immediately will undermine trust in the initiative, and it will undermine trust in data, because people will start to question the motive of the leader of why they want to embody this data-driven approach into the organization. Is it just about holding people to account, or actually are you looking to improve as an organization? My experience is a lot of organizations that start with operational dashboards and those sorts of things in the start of data-driven initiatives fail to make any meaningful decision-making progress, because there's no trust in the organization of the motive behind it, but equally the data initiative isn't linked to a decision. So if you think about it from an operational point of view, if you're providing an operational dashboard, what is the decision you're going to make at that point? Really, you're going to decide whether you're meeting KPIs or not. That really isn't data-driven decision making. So my recommendation is link it to your strategic development. Link it to your strategy, your roadmap, and your initiatives you're going to deliver on an annual basis that will contribute ultimately to your strategic goals. Now, one approach that you can use for this is the investment logic map, because I think that gives a nice way, a pre-existing model that allows you to embody data into a pre-existing decision-making framework. So if you're not familiar with investment logic mapping, it allows you to tell a story going from a problem or opportunity through the benefits you're looking to realize, identifying a bunch of options around initiatives and the assets that you're going to create from those initiatives. So effectively it becomes a story on a page of how you're going to go from a problem or opportunity to a solution and the benefit that you're going to realize from that. It's part of the Better for Business business casing process run by the Treasury, and all major investments that government do expect to see an investment logic map as part of that business casing process. But I think as a framework, it's actually quite powerful if you embed data further into the model. The model talks about, as it defines benefits, it talks about attaching KPIs to those benefits so that you can measure, that you're delivering and actually the outcome that you've achieved at the end of the investment. But actually, I think you can go further than that, and it's quite powerful when you start to embed data into that investment logic map process. So right from the start, you can start to think about, if you've got a problem or opportunity, What is the data that you've got available that indicated you've got a problem or opportunity in the first place? That could be the starting point. And ultimately, if you haven't got data to support that proposition that you've got an opportunity or a problem to solve, how do you know you've got an opportunity or problem? Is it just somebody making it up? So my recommendation is, if you haven't got data to support that in the first place, you probably need to pause and get some data and measurement to understand the problem in the first place before you start moving on. Because if you haven't got data available, how do you understand the root cause potentially of what could be causing that problem? That then leads through then when you start to think about benefits of solving that problem or taking advantage of that opportunity, you can then use those initial data sets to identify what are the KPIs that we're going to use. And it might be a slightly modified data set, pre-existing data set that you've got, or it could be a completely new data set. But it allows you to move from data you've got available today, an improvement activity that will improve the data that we will have available for us tomorrow, and how we're going to get there, and how those KPIs then will be used to measure performance in that area going forward. So you've gone from an initial data set that you already hold through to a new data set that you might want to connect to an ongoing operational performance data set that you can then use for continual improvement moving forward. Then as you start to think about what are the sub-initiatives to contribute to that outcome, what you can then start to do is identifying the smaller data sets that could be used on a business group by business group perspective that would be aggregated up to provide that higher figure. So again, that then contributes to an ongoing operational data set that could be used by individual business groups for a continual improvement and empowerment in their own operational area that they can use moving forward. So what you've moved from is a position where you had no real enduring data across an environment. You've identified multiple data sets. You've empowered people through the delivery of those activities, and you've demonstrated to everybody how data can be used to contribute to performance of the organization. More importantly, though, what you've actually done is create a learning opportunity. So we know cultural change doesn't happen overnight. It's actually quite difficult, and people need to learn. So creating those opportunities for people to learn are very important. Now, following this simple approach, what you actually start to do is leaders can start to understand how they can make big strategic decisions out of data. Operational units can start to look at how do they build an ongoing time series to understand ongoing performance. And individual business units can start to look at their own individual data sets and look at how do they use those for their own continual improvement and their own decision-making processes. You've created these different aspects of learning that then can be used to contribute to the broader learning of an organization. And ultimately, data-driven decision-making is a learning experience. You have to go through that experience. I've been in organizations where we've said to teams, you're empowered, make decisions. But actually, you're coming from an environment where teams have largely been disempowered for years. It's been a leader-led decision-making process. So suddenly saying to teams, you're now empowered, doesn't really help, because you've got to overcome that learning cycle and you've got to change the culture so that teams feel confident and comfortable with decision-making so that they're actually able to make them. And that goes back into that consistency and transparency layer as well. So that's really how to get yourself going on decision making. As I say, I think focus on the strategic decisions you're making. The clue is in the name in all of this, data-driven decision making. So it's using data to make decisions. It's not about creating dashboards and data warehouses and all those other things. It's actually about how do you use data to make an organizational decision at all the layers of your organization, not just to support your business case and activity, but how do you enable and empower your organization to use data for effective decision making. That's the end of my talk today, but if you'd like to learn more about my thoughts on digital transformation, you can subscribe to my channel on YouTube, or you can contact me via my website, chris@chrisbuxton.com. Thank you very much.